As you probably have heard by now, Corea passed away recently, quite unexpected because of a rare form of cancer, and this was not public, so it was quite a surprise when I found out yesterday evening. I wanted to do a little impromptu video just explaining why I think he is one of the bigger geniuses that has lived in the musical world. And let me start with, for me personally, he was one of the reasons that I got serious into music, that I got serious about. I'm a saxophone player, by the way, about saxophone, and it must have been probably 2004, 2005. I must have been 14-ish, that I stumbled upon a obscure web page with a little video, and that had, it was pre-YouTube still, so it was not so usual to find videos, but this was a little video of 45 seconds, something like that, and there was the electric band playing Got a Match all unison, and I was completely blown away. There was a second video on that webpage which was the Brecker brothers playing some Skunk Funk Live, and that combination really changed the course of my life. I was hooked onto music, onto saxophone, onto jazz, onto progressive music, and that really stays with me to today, and it will continue to stay with me, I'm sure. And I think that's one of the first main points for me. I think whenever you heard Chick for the first time, I think you might remember just that, because he makes impact. He is so distinguishable, he is so special in his sound. I think he really tries and succeeded at making an impact when he played. But let me go a little bit on with all the lessons I learned from him besides listening to his amazing music. He had really good advice for musicians. You might have seen this on the internet. There was this sheet with I don't know, 15, 16 points of advice to his musicians, but also already just from listening to him, how he went about improvisation and about composition. But let's start with improvisation. He basically went like, think of the space you have and then fill in the gaps of that space. So for me, this was, when I first read this was completely a mind shift. When you're into improvisation, it's all about how can I create new lines. So it's pretty much about where shall I play and what shall I play. So it kind of begs the question already to what shall I play, so you're playing all the time. But Chick went from just the space that music can provide and the other musicians can provide, and you are playing just in between that, and also you, when you play, very much like when you talk, you also don't want to start a sentence and then kind of, I don't know, don't go anywhere. You really want to make sure you're starting a sentence and then you really go to a clear end in your statement. So that's the opposite. Mostly we know what we want to start with and that we want to play something, but it kind of gets fuzzy along the way, at least in my case, and then you kind of dump it somewhere there and leave it over there, and then you go on to the next amazing start of your line, and then you kind of do the same over and over and think of what to play. But Jake taught me how to think about where to leave space and when you would insert phrases, and that's like a complete mind shift. Another one was his input on how he would practice, and he was technically so gifted, but there was this story from Eric Marienthal when I was back in the conservatory. He was there for a masterclass, and he was telling about Chick, how he would practice after an electric band concert, a pretty intensive concert, so probably, and he was practicing for this classical piece, I think Mozart or something like that, so it had technical challenges, and how he would just practice a difficult line but without any tempo, even, you know, not even a slow tempo, but just going from one finger to the next and really let every micro movement sink in to his fingers, and And then all of a sudden, then he would, he would kind of rather meditate on every connection between the notes. So also every connection that his fingers needed to make. And wow, this was such great information. Since I heard that like 10 years ago, I'm doing this all the time, and this helps me so much more than just practicing a line over and over, and even at a slow tempo, because you sometimes make mistakes, even small ones, but then you kind of go the next time, but you make a little mistake at the other point. But in this time, you have given yourself, your muscle memory, two different kind of versions or three already, and then you need to fix actually that wrong information. So this advice of Chick Corea is so good advice to go not even slow like most teachers will tell you, but without tempo, and really think of every movement involved. The next one is how he would compose and how he thinks of composition, because we know what he thinks about composition. He did a lot of, lessons recently online, which are great, but he also wrote this book about his process, which I actually have, which is very interesting. He writes down in here, and that's so interesting. He thinks of composition as a game. When you're the composer, you kind of decide what the rules are for that game. You set up a kind of concept, a kind of game, and then it starts with choosing which instruments you use, and then maybe which rhythms, which feel, and it's all up to you. You decide what the game is, but you should be clear about what the game is, and also to the other musicians, and it's all about play. And I think that's also a big part of Jake's message when he was kind of teaching other musicians, that it's all about play, and play is so important to learn and to grow as a person and as a musician, really. So it's also really fun to think about composition in the way of play or a game, because mostly with a lot of musicians it's a stressful thing. It's really it really has a lot of weight. Making a new composition has to be good, and there's really a lot of tension mostly in writing a new tune. But thinking of it like a game, in that you are the guy that can, or girl that can decide what the game is way more fun. A fun analogy actually, and it really relaxes the tension there. But what stands out too is that Jake was so versatile. He was an amazing jazz player in the traditional sense. His bebop and his straightforward jazz playing is out of this world. That is so great already, but then you have also, of course, the electric component with Return to Forever, and how he was really a pioneer on using electric instruments. And who else would have been so crazy to use a guitar and play some very fast bebop on that? Like Got a Match. It's pretty insane, but he did this so well. And all the bands he kind of, you can see he thought of it like a game. Like he had so many different bands with different concepts. Also the bands had different plans, and he played with it really, like in the literal sense of the word. And all those bands were, in terms of the music created, so versatile. It was straightforward to fusion to progressive to classical to Latin. There was so much, or Spanish. With the Spanish musicians, that's also something I really like, the flamenco stuff, which was of course very apparent in anything he did, also with the electric band and Return to Forever in the progressive stuff. So, but he did so much, he had so many influences, and then he played with them so great. And you can hear he also took this from, like, I always imagined Chick Corea wrote for an orchestra. Also when I listen to the electric band, like that's a 5-piece band, and they are all, one part of what could have been an 80-piece orchestra. So everything needs to have its own valuable part, not like you get, you get some chords, or they have all a very clear role to play, and then in the end it merges like in a complete orchestral work. And that was how I perceived it. And then later, actually, in his little book he wrote for musicians, he also explains like he thinks like that. But that was already clear before I even had heard him say that out loud. That makes that not only his compositional skills and his sense for melody, but also the arranging of all of those melodies are so superb. And then some stuff that really interests me is his voicings. Not only his harmonies, they are great too, but the way he structured his voicings. I'm not a pianist or a chord player, but they really intrigue me. And if you listen, for example, one of my favorite voicings, I don't think of favorite chords anymore, but of favorite voicings, because like the start of Crystal Silence, you hear A minor, but you can play A minor like this. But Chick Corea plays it like this. And that's one of the most beautiful things I heard. When I heard that tune, I had to know the voicing. And this one is, for example, so structured. It's a A minor, but he starts with this fourth voicing, A, D, G. So that's pretty dense. When you play fourths, that's pretty much in your face and really strong. But he kind of balances it on the top with then, B, the 9, and the C. They are really next to each other with this minor second, which gives a lot of crunch. But the C to G, that's the last part of it, is a perfect fifth, which is the most open sound you can have. So it gets this perfect balance of elements, like pretty much how you would make a dish and how you would put all the right amount of sour and the right amount of sweet and all the herbs. I don't know too much about cooking dishes really, but you can feel when there's too much salt or too much. He had this also in his playing. He cooked the right dishes. He had so much taste for balancing really, and that's how I perceive his voicings. And sometimes they were harsh, but that's exactly what he wanted to communicate there. So there is so much to learn from Jake's voicings. I'm really still intrigued by his voicings very much. And then I want to just give you some things you might listen, or my favorite tunes by Chick. And I won't mention here like I like Spain and all the typical stuff that now will get probably mentioned. They're really cool tunes, but there are probably some lesser known compositions of him that I want you to know about. And one of them is Folk Song from the Three Quartets album. I think it's, for me, one of the most beautiful melodies ever written. It's such a beautiful tune. All the musicians on the album is great, of course, but just the melody, the chords, it's a complete story. And then the voicings in this B part are so, it's like you feel almost the smoke rise up, or it's hard to describe, but this is such a great, beautiful tune with a great solo by Chick Corea, by the way. Also there you hear him play really nice lines, and you can hear he has this amazing ability of technical skills, but he goes for melody, and he let that being facilitated by his technique, but he doesn't put everything in there what he is able to play. At least it's a beautiful solo, a great tune in sense of his arranging, and what I mean with what I think his orchestral writing for even smaller bands like the Electric Band or Return to Forever is is one of the Electric Band's latest CD in 2004, To the Stars, and there's a tune, The Long Passage, and it's really a unique blend of classical, progressive rock, jazz. I don't know, it really doesn't really matter what it's a blend of. It's a blend of Chick Corea, and it's really an amazing composition. It's such a great story to follow, and it goes from one point to the next with really like how a classical composer probably would have written this, wasn't it, for the heavy distortion guitars and the hard chords, and the way he combs there in Frank Gambale's solo is as great as Frank's solo, which is also great, but yeah, sorry, that's at least, you know, maybe I talk a bit too much, but that's really a great composition and arrangement. And then this is the last one. This is an album that I think gets, you know, just maybe a little bit too less attention. He made so many great albums. But the second Chick Corea Electric Band, the only CD they made, Paint the World. It's the album is stuffed with only great tunes and some of the greatest writing that you've ever heard, in my opinion. If you see it just, of course, this is all my opinion, but if you see it from a melody standpoint, the chords, how every instrument is arranged, the playing is amazing on it. It's really a great band. Gary Novak is so great on that. Yeah, that's really one of my favorite albums from Chick. So, and then I'll wrap up with just one last little story about Chick Corea. He made me have my most impulsive decision in my life, because I think was 2016, I saw the Electric Band after such a long break would be touring again. And then I found out it was all tour dates only in the USA. And I live in Belgium, Western Europe. I really wanted to see the Chick Corea Electric Band in my life. That's one of my main influences. All my other main influences, Paul Desmond, Michael Brecker, I missed out on, and I didn't want to let that happen to Chick and the Chick Corea Electric Band especially. So at that point I said to my wife, they're playing in Los Angeles, you know, I just want to go to Los Angeles. And you know, you found the right one when your wife says, yeah, sure, let's do that, even although she is really not into fusion at all. So we made this, yeah, what was it, about 15 hour travel to Los Angeles, and we had a blast. There were 2 sets, the Electric Band. We signed up for the first one. It was amazing. Then we apparently had a mutual friend in, which was the sound guy for Chick Corea, who was a Dutch guy, and then he actually got us in also on the second set, and they played a complete different set, all other Electric Band tunes. So we were also, Alicia Keys walked in, and yeah, we Stanley Clarke, and we had like 4 hours of live Electric Band. It was superb, one of the best decisions in my life, also one of the most impulsive ones, but thank you, Chick. I'm so thankful I did that, and I'm so thankful for your work and your immense inspiration that you provide for me, and I'm sure for so many other people. If I had to describe you in one word, it would be playful. And you know, that's how we can hear how he thought about music, about composition, about everything, and I think it's a very great skill to emphasize. Thank you, Jake.